Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey here, once again with another video on The Flash, Season 5. Are we surprised? What else would I be doing? Anyway, so this season of The Flash has had a few decent surprises and unexpected moments, whether that be some of the reveals or revelations in Nora's story in regards to her past before she decided to come back to the past or the present. Then we had Cicada being cured of his meta powers only for his niece from the future to randomly show up and take over as the big bad, a more threatening big bad might I add. And now, as we saw last episode, we have Nora adopting or embracing or just taking on the negative Speed Force and then returning once again to our present or her past and looking to do Bebo knows what in this time period. But in last episode, towards the beginning of the episode, we did see Nora sulking and being depressed about not being able to travel back due to the fear that her father, Barry, would sense her traveling back through the Speed Force. But then coming to the realization that Eobard, or the Reverse Flash, would have traveled back many times without her father or any of the other speedsters noticing that he was coming. But how did he do that? Well, that's because Eobard doesn't use the regular old Speed Force like those good speedster chumps and absolute noobs use. He uses the negative Speed Force. But hold on, what is the negative Speed Force? And are there any major differences with it to the normal or positive Speed Force if you want to call it? Well, let's go over all of that and what it could mean going forward into specifically this week's episode with Nora, but also the rest of the season. But first off, let's go over that first scene in last week's episode where Eobard, presents the idea of the negative Speed Force to Nora, and also be sure to let me know all your various comments and thoughts and stuff in the comment section down below, and if I do miss out on anything that's, I guess relevant and important. And of course, if you're going to enjoy the video and you found this video informative or interesting, please drop a like on it to show your support. So Eobard says, "I used to idolize your father. I wanted to be just like him. Well, it was not my fate. I was to be the reverse, opposite of him in every way. And so, instead of tapping into the Speed Force to access my powers, I created my own." And after this, when Nora asks Eobard whether she can use it to travel back in time, he says that she can do that and more. Now, all of this lines up with the comic story of Reverse Flash, which has been changed here and there over the years, but the negative Speed Force isn't that old in the comics. The Reverse Flash has been around for a while, but the in-depth understanding and explanation of the negative Speed Force is fairly recent in the larger scope of the comics, and in particular, the character of the Flash and the Reverse Flash. But the last thing I mentioned from that opening portion of the episode last week, when Nora asked whether she can, time travel, and Eobard says she can do that, but also more, that is very interesting and seems like the show could be going full negative Speed Force with Nora, but we will jump more into that, later on. So, as I said, while Reverse Flash or Professor Zoom has been around for a while in the comics, first appearing in September of 1963, it wasn't until basically exactly 46 years later in September of 2009 where the negative Speed Force and the true source of his powers were explored and for the most part explained. Some elements were later explained in DC Rebirth, which are the parts we might see, play into Nora's experience with the negative Speed Force, but we will get to that soon. But we will just go over the comic interpretation and explanation of the negative Speed Force, which you will notice is fairly similar to what Eobard said to Nora, but just a bit more in depth. So the negative Speed Force, as Eobard does say to Nora, was created by Eobard Thawne and is a negative, opposite, or let's just insert a bit of a dramatic pause here, reverse version of the Speed Force. So it's an extra dimensional, field of negative energy that eats away at the regular Speed Force, essentially like a cancer, and can consume any speedster connected to it just by touch. And as we see in the comics, and kind of with the TV show with Barry Allen with the Speed Force, Eobard Thawne himself is the generator of the negative Speed Force with every step that he does run. The first time we really saw Eobard do anything different with the negative Speed Force as a sort of tool, I guess you could say, was when he used it to corrupt Barry, hoping that the negative Speed Force would go on to consume Barry's loved ones, Iris and stuff, and those who rely on it, and then going on to consume Barry in the grief that he was in so that he would merge with the Speed Force. Now, for those that are currently reading the DC Rebirth run of The Flash, the one that Godspeed was introduced into, you would know how the negative Speed Force has come into play throughout that. And also, you might already know how it could affect Nora going forward throughout this season. But for those that haven't read it, let's jump into it and explain it. And I guess spoilers, if you are reading the comic but aren't caught up or have plans to. But if you haven't started reading now, I don't think you ever will. So about maybe just under halfway through the current run of the Flash, Reverse Flash decides to be a nuisance again. I mean, like, what a shock. Who would have thought that? I know. But we see Eobard lead Barry into the negative Speed Force with the reasoning that he thinks that it will keep him trapped there forever. However, instead of that going down and Barry getting trapped in there like an absolute idiot, Barry basically does a 360 no-scope while double tapping Y and has his Speed Force connection corrupted instead, with Barry now gaining connection to the negative Speed Force, as well as taking on not a completely different look, but just a bit of a different look. I wouldn't say an upgrade because I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but essentially, imagine, I'll try and show it on screen right now. It's basically Barry's Flash suit, but the gold elements are taken away and they sort of become black. And then his lightning when he runs also becomes this like weird black affected lightning, but not pure black. It's sort of like weird black, if that makes sense. So yeah, it looked a bit different. He almost looked like a zombie. That's what I thought when I saw it first. Like, oh, it's like a zombie Flash. Anyway. Now, Barry does end up escaping and going to the future and promises that he'll kill Eobard. Like, this whole thing took place in the Flash Museum. But this whole thing with him, wanting to kill Eobard and stuff like that and this massive threat were like the real early signs of that corruption. Now, Eobard is actually killed soon after this, but not by Barry. Funnily enough, it was by Iris. Like, she was in this whole situation. It wasn't, he wasn't killed by Barry. Now, Iris basically, like, nuclear blasts him with this black hole weapon with the Flash that was actually in the Flash Museum, sorry. So, yeah. But the negative Speed Force goes on to remain within Barry's system. It doesn't just disappear from his system because the generator, Eobard, is no longer around. And this causes Barry to unintentionally just send destruction and destructive forces around him, which, causes damage. Now, Barry then soon notices like changes to his powers and abilities, such as, the main one was his metabolism. He's got the accelerated metabolism, and this led to him taking longer to heal from injuries, which we know he heals fairly quickly, like something that could take months and months to recover from. Barry, can cure or recover in like a couple of hours. With us soon seeing that the negative Speed Force is also playing with his emotions in a negative way, which can lead to him just like snapping at people and stuff like that. But we soon see after this that the negative Speed Force can be sort of controlled when in the company of its opposite or reverse, the regular or positive Speed Force, and this was done through the Wally West or Kid Flash character. In regards to the powers that the negative Speed Force provides to its user, you obviously get the base speeds to powers we have seen before, like we all know them. But the negative Speed Force provides some other interesting abilities, which include the power to absorb memories from others, the ability to negate Speed Force users' powers, which is pretty interesting, and the power to alter age at will, as well as tearing out negative Speed Force from other users without actually killing them. And as I was saying before, when Nora was speaking to Eobard, he tells her she can time travel through the use of the negative Speed Force and more. So what if Nora is possibly going to be able to use one of these other speedster or these negative Speed Force abilities, or possibly a completely new ability that the show might make that differs from anything that people like Barry or Wally or Jay could do? Now, out of these unique, like, negative Speed Force abilities I did list, I think the one, if there was going to be one, that Nora could use is the negating of Speed Force users' powers. I think it would be pretty cool if Nora was able just basically to render Barry useless around her when he tries to take her or capture her or something like that. That'd be interesting. But as the comic references to the negative Speed Force, it does take a toll on your emotional state. Like, it makes you emotionally fragile for the most part, and very likely to either get angry really, really quickly, or just affect your decision making by playing on any emotions you have had, or might have at that current moment. Which was basically what allowed Nora to tap into the negative Speed Force at first, as well as what will most likely be driving her in this week's episode. I personally can't wait to see how the show does portray someone struggling with just, harnessing the negative Speed Force, because I felt the comics did a pretty decent job with it. Maybe a bit extreme in some cases, but still pretty decent. And you never know, they could be doing all this stuff with Nora and the negative Speed Force to maybe set something even bigger up with this, negative Speed Force and its effect on someone else. Who knows? But really, last episode, we only just got to see Nora first, tapping into it, then emerging. She didn't really say anything. We just saw her glowing with the red lightning at stages and the glowing red eyes. So we didn't really see her, acting with this negative Speed Force within her. So this week's episode will really show us how it is affecting her, as well as if they're going to do anything that interesting with it. But it is important to remember that episode 21 is called The Girl with the Red Lightning. So you would have to think this thing with Nora and the negative Speed Force continues into episode 21 and possibly even the finale. But that's for us to, watch, wait, and find out. Or I guess Wait, watch and then find out. One of the two. But thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like on it to show support. Let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions on this video. How long do you think Nora's going to have the negative speed force attached to her? Do you think it could maybe lead to her downfall at the end of the season? Who knows? It'd be interesting. But leave all of your various opinions in the comment section down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. And I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye.